In the story of Abraham, the divine is characterized in relationship to something like ambition. So Abraham he's already immersed in a situation that's akin in a way to the scenario of a wealthy and a person in the modern world who's in a situation of abundance. Abraham's parents are wealthy and they provide for him. There's nothing he needs to do. And in consequence, so he's attained the socialist utopia or the consumerist utopia. You can look at it either way. And there's no reason for him to move forward. So he doesn't do anything till he's 75. And then the voice comes to him, which is the voice of adventure. And it's God in this story. That's how God is defined, right? And God says to Abraham, you have to leave all this comfort, which is a very interesting proposition to begin with. It's like, why the hell would you leave that when you have everything you need? Well, the implication is that you don't have everything you need when you're being delivered everything you need. That isn't how life works. Okay, so God says you have to leave your father's tent. You have to leave your tribe. You have to leave those who speak your language. You have to venture out into the world. So God is conceptualized in this story as the impulse, the voice that compels you out into the world and that encourages you to do so. So that's a hypothesis about what the ultimate up is. Okay. And Abraham agrees, and he does so in two ways. He builds an altar, signifying his aim, that he's going to abide by the command of this voice or the invitation of this voice, and that he'll make the appropriate sacrifices. It's a crucial point to understand, because the process of transformation requires sacrifice. To be more than you are means you have to let go of that which you were. You have to make sacrifices. Now, Abraham's life is punctuated by a sequence of reaffirmations of his upward aim and declamations of his willingness to sacrifice. Every time he finishes an adventure, he reconstitutes the covenant, right? So this is this agreement to follow the voice of adventure. Okay. God makes him a deal. That's the covenant. It's a very interesting deal. So now imagine, biologically speaking, that there is an instinct to integrate that operates within us. Okay, so now it's just as fundamental as the hypothalamic motivational states, let's say, but it's more sophisticated. And what it's trying to do is to integrate all the motivational states across time and socially. Right? And then imagine it manifests itself as an instinct, to be something like the instinct to mature, right? To move forward, right? To leave your zone of comfort, right? And maybe there have been people like Csikszentmihalyi who've characterized that as the attractiveness of flow. And maybe it's associated with the exploratory circuit in the hypothalamus that's mediated by dopamine. Okay, but it's got its character. Now, the character of that instinct in this story is, the way it's characterized is as the voice of adventure. So it's the thing that asks you to move beyond your zone of comfort and go into the foreign world. Now, the advantage to that is that you fortify yourself and you develop, right? So no matter how good you are now, if you push yourself to the edge, you're going to be better than you are. And that's a better win than merely being good like you are now. So that would be participation in that transformative process is a higher form of attainment than mere attainment of any specific goal. Okay, so that's the call to adventure. That's the call to a quest. That's what Gandalf offers Bilbo, for example. Okay, God characterizes the consequences of that. And this is so cool. When I figured this out, it just flattened me. It's so interesting. God says, okay, God is defined as that which says this, by the way. If you push yourself beyond your zone of comfort, even if it's functioning for you, that's Abraham's situation, here's what'll happen. You'll live your life in a manner that's a blessing to you. So that's a good deal, because the miserable people you're talking about, the depressed people, the trapped people, their life isn't a blessing to themselves. So what's a pathway to blessing? Well, it's not satiation, not in this formulation. It's voluntary. It's the voluntary quest, and it's characterized by adventure. So that's deal number one. You'll live in a life that'll be a blessing to you. Okay. And then God says, that's not all that'll happen. You'll be a blessing to yourself in a manner that will make you renowned among other people justly. So that's a good deal, because we know that people, men in particular, are very status oriented, partly because their reproductive success is highly correlated with their social status. And, the psychopaths game that, but still, it's like renown is crucially important. You want to be the quarterback on the shoulders of your teammates, so that'll be the second thing that happens. And then the same voice says, and that's not all. You'll be a blessing to yourself and be renowned in a manner that will maximize the probability that you will establish something of lasting value. That's a good deal. So that's stretching across time, multi-generationally, because God tells Abraham that if he follows the pathway of adventure, he'll be the father of nations. So what that means is that he'll establish the pattern of paternal conduct that will maximize the success of his offspring in the longest possible run. So that's so cool.
This is success at a distance,
right,
and over time.
Exactly. And then the final offer is you'll do that in a way that'll bring abundance to everyone else too. Now, so think about what that means biologically. This is so cool. And I can't see how it can be wrong. It means that if you hearken to the voice that calls you out of your zone of comfort, you do that voluntarily, so you put yourself on the edge of adventure, you will be following the instinct that has already evolved to make your life a blessing to yourself, to make you successful among other people, to maximize your probability of long-term success, and to do that in a way that brings abundance to your community. And then you think, look, let's take the contrary hypothesis. The contrary hypothesis would be twofold. There is no compulsion to adventure. It's like, that seems highly improbable. Or that the compulsion to adventure isn't aligned with psychological and social well-being. Well, what's the chance that the fundamental drive that would facilitate your transformation across time would not be aligned with your psychological integrity and the success of the community? Like, we wouldn't be social animals if that was the case. So as far as I can tell, that has to be true. Now, that doesn't mean you can get lost in false adventures. That can happen. That's what an addiction is, or that's what pornography is. It's a false adventure, right? It's failure to hit the proper target, you might say. But that central drive to integration across time and communally, why wouldn't that be an instinct? And then we could cap that with an observation that I also think is self-evidently true once you understand it. So imagine that you're a father. Now, this spirit of adventure is often characterized paternally, right? Insofar as God's the father in these ancient stories. So think about this. So when you see your son, now it's also true of your daughter, but I'll focus on sons for the moment. When you see your son, and you love your son, when you see your son pushing himself beyond his own limits in an adventurous manner, if you're a good father, you definitely encourage that, right? And I would say, insofar as you encourage that, you are a good father. And that would mean that you're the embodiment of that spirit that calls to adventure. That's why Abraham is characterized, for example, in this story as forging an alliance with the spirit of his ancestors, with the deity of his ancestors. He's embodying the call to adventure, and that's what makes him the father whose reproductive enterprise is successful across the broadest possible span of time. I think I just can't see how that can be wrong. And that's a characterization of the divine. And there's other, it complexifies, because what the stories are trying to do is to give you an image of what that integrating personality might be like. And it's sophisticated. So a single characterization is insufficient. So in the story of Noah, this personality is characterized quite differently. So Noah is presented as a man who's wise in his generations, which means that for his time and place, he's moral and reputable. So he's the sort of guy that people would go to for advice because he's lived a life that's emblematic of his wisdom, let's say. Okay, now a voice comes to him and says, batten down the hatches there, mate. Trouble's coming. Okay, so So here's the hypothesis. The hypothesis is the voice that calls to the wise to prepare in times of trouble is a manifestation of the divine. And it's the same as the voice that calls the unwilling to adventure. That's the monotheistic hypothesis. And so you can see what the imagination is doing is agglomerating these different characterizations of high aim, insisting that there's an integrated unity behind them, and then trying to conceptualize that integrated unity across time. And so, and I think that's done with radical success in the biblical library, that the culmination of the library of stories is the impressionistic representation of this integrating pattern. And I think that's what people call on when they're engaging in a religious enterprise that is radically successful, like that happened in the case of your friend, right? So he got a new personality, and that new personality had different incentive structure.